I'll be honest, I wasn't even expecting this one, but multiple time Mr. Olympia Chris Bumstead has one of the most aesthetic squats this side of quad hypertrophy. Chris Bumstead, aka CBum, is a 4-time Mr. Olympia champion, which is essentially the Olympics of bodybuilding. Now, whether or not you consider bodybuilding even a sport, we cannot deny the quality of CBum's squat. Unfortunately, we don't know his max squat, and he no longer seems to stray near heavy weights with the barbell back squat, seemingly preferring to use the Smith machine squat for heavier weights. The heavier weights, of course, being in inverted commas with the Smith machine. While he still does squat, it looks to be capped in the sub 200 kilo range. At his heaviest, however, we have seen him rep approximately 227.5 kilos or 500 pounds for some very easy sets of 10. The outcomes from a rep mac calculator put that at around 290 kilos, but given that it was for multiple sets, I suspect Chris, if he wanted to, could squat in excess of 300 kilos. Now, Chris is the perfect example of a high bar squat with low bar placement. He squats deep and upright while maximizing forward knee travel. This makes perfect sense for a bodybuilder looking to maximize the use of his knee extensors in a heavy compound movement. The more forward knee travel and the deeper he gets, the more muscles related to knee flexion and extension will experience concentrated loading, hopefully leading to increased quad hypertrophy. Not only can we look at this theoretically and come to that conclusion, we can look at some elite weightlifters' quads and come to a similar thought process. Now, we're not here to argue what's the best option for quad growth, but rather we're here to look at what we consider some of the best ways to squat heavy weights with large ranges of motion. The beauty of using CBum's squat style is that you can use it regardless of which of the following camps you fall into, such as you're a not so perfectly built weightlifter, you're a competitive powerlifter, maybe you're an athlete looking to increase force output, or even a gym goer who likes to squat deep and heavy. Chris stands at 6'1" or 185 centimeters, so looking at his height alone, you might be forgiven for thinking he's not going to have the most amazing squat, but Chris defies the default thought processes and gives us some great learning points. First off, Chris employs the hybrid squat, where one squats with a low bar position, but then approaches the mechanics as if he were squatting high bar. As a taller lifter, your longer torso is essentially harder to control during the descent of the high bar squat. When the bar is placed on the back in a high bar position, the back acts like one end of a seesaw. The longer the seesaw, and the further along the seesaw you put pressure, the easier it is to pivot the seesaw down. Your back is no different. The longer your back and the higher the bar, the more opposing forces you need to resist the forward pushing effect of the barbell. As a taller lifter will often tilt forward immediately as soon as the squat begins, this low bar position arrests some of this momentum by shortening the lever and stops a bit before it begins, which allows more consistent and repeatable reps. From this low bar position, we also gather a second benefit. We make the job of squatting in a tightly stacked and efficient bottom position much easier. The low bar position is assumed, the torso is slightly tilted forward, the hips are correspondingly sent back ever so slightly behind the heels. Now, if we squatted like this during a high bar squat, the tilt in the torso could be too much and it would expose upper back flexion or unwanted torso tilting. However, with this hybrid squat where we push our knees forward and keep our hips traveling in a straight line, we end up requiring less ankle mobility or knees in front of toes distance. The prime movers here are still the hip extensors, as we can see with CBum squat. If we watch you squat from the side, we can see there's a large amount of work being done is moving through forward knee travel from the top of the squat all the way to the rise out of the bottom. So of note here, this allows for less but not no demand on the ankle mobility. You still can't get away with having terrible ankle mobility, as Chris demonstrates by achieving these positions barefoot. Being a taller lifter with longer limbs might make squatting a little bit more tricky, but it's no excuse to neglect your ankle mobility, which unless you've had some bone altering incident, you likely can improve on from where you are right now. Now, if you've chosen the squat to be one of your primary leg hypertrophy movements, for example as a base where you're looking to gain mass to potentiate strength gains later in the block, this style of squat is more likely to withstand fatigue's effect on technique during higher reps. Generally, during the typical high bar squat, the upper back is the first place to give under pressure, followed by a negative downstream effect on the knee and toe tracking. With this hybrid squat, however, as we are more likely, although not guaranteed, but more likely to keep a better torso position, we are more likely then to keep the focus on the knee extensors and grow the legs. On top of all this, Chris has worked an extra advantage from his bodybuilding style training into his squat gains. Whether or not this was an intentional effect, the large amount of upper body mass and strength Chris possesses has increased his ability to squat in such a manner. The more mass he has in his delts, lats, mid-traps, and the more room he has to hold the bar in a good position. On top of this large volume of back work has given him an incredible level of proprioception with his back. This greater level of mind-muscle connection allows him to maintain positions due to increased strength, but also due in part to his ability to correctly place and tense the relevant areas as required. So don't neglect your back hypertrophy if you want a monster aesthetic squat. Chris is an excellent example of this, and any taller lifters watching, I encourage you to squat deep, but squat deep like our man CBum. Today's video is brought to you by Seek a Strength Growth on Your Squat program, as this whole series is. It is an 8-week squat program, 2 sessions per week. It is very tough, but it is very manageable if you put your best foot forward from it, and you will reap the rewards.